Good evening, everybody. This is Mike Seibert from Blue Seahorse, and we're going to start the show tonight with an introduction to the. Sorry about this. We got a little stuff going on. A little introduction to one of the books that I've written, and my guest tonight is Carrie Sluter, who I forgot to introduce. I guess I'm really making a mess of this one, but we'll trudge on and see what happens. The introduction to the books that I've written is these stories are from a larger book that I've written called What Role Did I Play? What Role Did I Play was written after many years of counseling individual youth, teens, and families. The question continued to come up about what role adults played in the child, youth, or teen's upbringing. By the end of the series, most of the sessions, the participants would have knowledge to ask themselves, what role am I playing in the current situation, and what are my consequences? Mm-hmm. Which is, I think, a question we don't ask ourselves too much.
Not near enough, Mike.
And I wish we did. And where do we get that knowledge to start asking ourselves that question? Yeah, I want to do that. And it has value onto me because I like doing it, whatever it might be. But what are the consequences if I do it? Mm-hmm. And the other thing I work a lot with families is the word consequences. I like to have people replace the word punishment with the word consequences. Consequences normally has a negative connotation unless it's explained to you. Punishment only has one meaning. You're being punished. That's all there is to it. But your consequences for running the business that you run and going to work every day is you get a check at the end of the week. Mm-hmm. That's consequences for your actions. And that's a positive consequences. You're able to buy yourself the things you like, pay your bills, which is a positive consequences. And then if you're going to act negatively, then there are going to be negative consequences. And they could be whatever the legal system decides they need to be. Mm-hmm. So where do we learn that growing up so we can address those issues when we become adults? And one of the chapters in my book is called We Teach Our Children. And it starts out by saying, we teach our children by example. Then we have only ourselves to blame for what they become. As parents, do we really accept responsibility for the actions of our children, or do we say, we taught them right from wrong, and they should have known better? How many times have you heard that?
Many.
And the business that you work in, and the Believers Business Center and stuff that you work with, and your own private business, when you get younger people in there, how do they respond when they're starting to be held accountable?
Right.
and where do they go with that? I know we talked about this chapter before we came on, and I'm really interested to see where your thoughts are on this chapter, because you're right in the middle of raising young children right now.
Right.
And you've taken on children that aren't even yours, and you've taken responsibility, and I know you love them, and you're working on adopting them and taking care of them, and which is a wonderful thing, and I admire you for that. But where do you see yourself in this role now?
Right. Well, if that's an opening, I'll take it.
It's an opening.
One of the things, Mike, that really intrigues me about this is not just what role did I play, but in the roles of the other parents that gave birth to the children or have been raising them prior to me receiving them or getting them, having them come and live with me. The things that I see them do that they learned by following the role that the parents played. They develop habits. As our children are developing habits based on what they see us do, how we respond to things, everything we do we are teaching them how to behave.
Yep.
We are teaching them how to respond to things in their future. We're teaching them how to treat us. And I know that you mentioned that in one of your books, and it's a great point that, you know, we're teaching people how to treat us every day and what we allow. There's certain things that I've seen with my children. You know, there's certain things that they know are not acceptable.
Right.
Just absolutely not acceptable, so they don't behave that way. You know, they don't do certain things based on their respect for me, and more than anything, that they know that they can't get away with that. There's other things that they'll toy with and pull using what you've taught them is acceptable behavior. If, for example, if your child throws a little temper tantrum and you end up getting what they want, you've just told them and taught them that it's okay, and if you throw that temper tantrum long enough, you will get what you want.
Yep.
So,
And that's all the stuff that we write
Oh,
about.
yeah.
You and I talk about all the time, write
Mhm.
about all the time. While you were just talking about I took it as boundary. You didn't say the word boundaries, but we talk about boundaries in our homes.
mhm.
My wife and I have grandchildren, or she has grandchildren, and they come over to the house a lot. And in our house, we have grandpa's and grandma's rules.
Right,
And that's all there is to it.
right,
Because they're like coming into, and it's hard for me to visualize being the grandpa, that the grandchildren are 4 and 5 years old. They're coming into old people's houses.
Mhm.
They're coming into this old people's home,
Mhm.
and they got little stuff everywhere,
right,
all over the place, and you can't touch it. And they don't anymore. They used to, but grandpa's meanie, and grandpa says, no, no, no. I only say it a couple times. And we have a good time with them. Now they come over, they know the boundaries. Now what they do when they go home, it's not my concern.
right,
But in our place, and children are very adaptable, and we all know, like in my counseling service, I'll get clients come in my office, and they'll use some profanity, which I don't like and I don't allow, and we have to address that issue. But if they don't stop, I'll tell them we're going to move the counseling service to the church.
right,
And we're going to go into the church, but then I can't swear.
right,
Aha. So you have control, and you understand there's certain things, places you can do things, and certain places you can't do things.
right.
And kids know that.
Mhm.
They know where they have to behave, where they can get away with stuff.
Mhm.
And we teach our children that. And that's why I wrote this particular chapter, is parents don't think like that anymore.
That's a big key, Mike. A lot of the things in society has changed that is causing a lot of the parents, even who know better and know how to raise their children, to back up on the standard principles of authority and teaching your children to respect you and do what you tell them to do, taking orders immediately when you give a command to your child. I give you an example. My daughter, when she was real little, one day her dad had visitation with her, and she came home after being with him for a few days, and we were in the pool, and she's swimming and playing and having a good time, and I called out her name, and she didn't answer, and I called her again, and she didn't answer. She just kept on playing. Called her again. She looked over just as nonchalant, and what? And I said, Ashley, did you hear me call? I know you heard me call you. Yeah. I said, why didn't you answer me? And she looked at me and she said, well, my dad counts to 3. And call me this 3 times.
Right.
He taught her that was okay and acceptable.
Yep.
To listen to the third time, till the third time. So what I did in addressing that, and we need to think more as parents, and that we don't have to give in to those things and get upset about it. I loaded her right up in the car the next day, took her straight to her dad's, knocked on the door, and I said, we need to have a chat. So he and his wife and Ashley and I sat out the table, at a picnic table in the yard, and I told him the incident that happened. And I said, Ashley's telling me that you count to 3. I said, and he said, well, yeah. And I said, well, let me ask you something. If she's running towards the road and there's a car coming, do you want her to wait until the 3rd time I tell her to stop? And he went, no. And I said, then why would you teach her that that's acceptable behavior? That she doesn't have to listen. She's my daughter. She listens to my first command. And then I went on, of course, as the counselor, to instruct him that, we have to teach her. It's our job to teach her to listen to us as parents so that when she's older, her boss is now her authority. God is her first authority, and she's going to hear his voice the first time, not the 3rd time.
Right.
So it was very interesting, when that happened. But how we address things and how we put a stop to those things the minute we see them can make all the difference in the world.
Well, that's another topic we talked about before was the count of 3.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a whole show on that, in that if you don't change that, their perception is it takes 3 warnings
Right.
before anything happens,
Right.
before I get fired, before this happens.
Yep.
But I should be able to get stopped 3 times for speeding without getting a ticket.
Right.
None of that works outside the home.
No.
It doesn't work outside the home, only in the home. And that's what parents forget. And that's why I'm so concerned, and we have talks, and we have seminars, and we have discussion groups with parents on small things. It's the small things.
It's a small thing.
It's always the little things that they don't think about.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's not important. It's not important.
Right.
Go to bed. Do this. Do that. It's just a small thing.
But it overflows into everything, though, Mike, when
Yeah.
you look at it in the bigger picture, because all of a sudden, I'm calling her from she's upstairs, or the kids are upstairs, and when you call them to come down, they'll hear you and ignore it, and boy, I'll hop to right here
Yep.
and get right in their face. That is not acceptable. When you hear me, you better say, at least acknowledge that you heard me and that you're on your way. You don't keep me waiting, and so
Right.
we're instructing those children how to behave throughout life, that there's authority and a voice or a command. You take a child that has no authority and no respect for authority, and then all of a sudden they're stuck in the military,
Yep.
or we expect them to stand up to a boss and keep a job, or, so our expectations are, that they would automatically do these things. But every action we take in raising children and teaching children is teaching them to become that person
Yep.
that we're expecting them to be. And I notice in here you talk about that. We're so quick to take the credit for the good,
Yep.
but then to shun that, well, I taught them better. Did we really, if we taught them that there's no need for respect of authority? And to expect that all of a sudden this magic day when they grow up, that they're going to have that if we didn't instill it in the little things.
And that's society's, I'm not going to say society's fault, but that is society. We've talked about that before too. At 17 years old, 364 days, you're a teenager.
Right.
That 365th day,
Mm-hmm.
you're now an adult.
Right.
And society looks at you different when you're 18. When you're 17, there's a whole lot of concessions you get.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 18, they stop. And when you're 21, they stop even more.
Right.
There's no instruction manual that 17-year-olds can read. All my life changes when I become 18.
You're right.
There's no manual for that.
Mm-hmm.
They have to find out the hard way, and some of them do find out the hard way.
Well, with society being what it is, this day and time, Mike, I deal a lot with the courts and the systems and the new rules and regulations. And quite honestly, I've seen some crazy stuff that makes no sense at all. For example, you have a teenager that you have no authority. They'll tell you, well, you can't do anything to stop them, but yet you're responsible for them.
Yeah.
And the courts and the system ties your hands a lot. That happens a lot. But when we tap into the common knowledge that we have to become more knowledgeable and understanding the little things matter
Yeah.
to teach ourselves and help ourselves to help these children.
And the other thing that you brushed on before was behaviors and consequences in the home. One thing I work with parents on is not taking, or if you, I'm going to take away your movie. I'm going to take away your field trip because you've been bad,
Right.
or I think you've been bad. What I try to get them to do is change the word takeaway to you
Right.
lose. Now, you haven't been appropriate, so you have lost the right to go. You have lost the privilege of watching that TV show you wanted to watch. You have lost. You earn as a child, and you lose as a child.
Right,
We shouldn't have to say we take away.
right,
That's a parent's role in trying to become superior. I have power over you, so I'm going to take
Right.
away your rights. That's up to the courts,
right.
I think. Parents should be smarter than that. Their children should learn, if I misbehave, I'm going to lose something.
Right. Well, one of my favorite sayings is with the kids is bad behavior is not going to get rewarded.
No?
You know, you made a choice, and so you're not going to get the reward.
Yep. And you lose the reward.
You lose the privilege. You
Yeah.
lose the reward.
And that's why I like to work on with awarding things and rewarding children for appropriate behavior is the reward and no reward system rather than the reward and punishment.
Right.
So if there's something coming up that they want to earn, it might be a night with the kids out, it might be a sleepover, it could be a dance, it could be something that teenagers do and kids do as they grow up. Could be Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, whatever. They have to earn the right to go on that camping trip. They have to earn the right to go on that field trip. They can also lose that right. And that's what they start to understand. And eventually you'll even hear them saying to their friends, oh, I lost the right to go. You know, not that I'm being punished. Because it's a mindset. Once you can instill that mindset, not only in the parents, but in the children,
Right.
life is actually a little bit easier in the home. It really is. And if we go on here a little bit, because you mentioned something I wanted to cover in here.
Okay.
As we think about the role we play as parents in our children's lives, what comes to mind? Some say, I want them to have more than I did as I grew up, or I don't want them to be treated the way I was. They are both great thoughts, and most of us have similar ones. While some of us will have a couple of more, also good and relative to that parent. My question is, do those thoughts have anything to do with your child being held accountable and responsible for their actions? We are, as parents, responsible for the actions of our children until they are considered legal adults. And a lot of parents, even at 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, tend to push that off on the community, on the school system, on the legal system. I can't control that child. I can't do this. I can't do that.
Right.
And there's ways to deal with that through the legal system if you really want to, but there's always that them and us syndrome.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to get over. And some of it's perpetrated by the people and some of it's perpetrated by the authorities. But it's a tough one to break. And if more parents took, I guess, a more active role in their home, and even though, you know, we work hard as parents. I know I always did when I grew up, and I wanted to have some quiet time when I come home. But I lost that when I started having kids.
Right.
And it took me a number of years to come to terms with, I helped create these children. They're my responsibility. My wants and needs have to go on the back burner for 18 years, at least 18 years,
Right.
and sometimes longer. But I didn't accept that for a long time. And in a couple of cases, it was too late to accept that. And, you know, I have not the best relationship with my children. They're all adults now and grown and doing their own thing, but, you know, we're respectful, but I didn't instill in them that responsibility of you're accountable for yourself. And I'm gonna be there until you get old enough. And I wasn't there.
Right.
So I can't blame them for some of that. But I didn't take the role responsible.
Right, which goes back to why we do what we do now.
Yep.
You know, and you learn from your mistakes. Hopefully we can help others to not make those same mistakes. So there's a lot of, new parents that are watching that haven't already made those mistakes or that are looking for a better way with their children. So, we can share from our experiences of what we've been through. And
Yeah. This is the part here that I find interesting, and I get this a lot. It seems we are always ready to take responsibility and credit when our children do good.
Mm-hmm.
If they are A students, a basketball star, president of the student body, or any number of positive accomplishments,
Right.
when a parent tells us, "You have done a great job with your child, you must be so proud," we do not say, "We had nothing to do with it, it's their fault, we taught them right from wrong."
Mm.
We don't say that.
Right.
We take it because
yeah.
it feeds our ego.
Mm-hmm.
When our children get into trouble and some parent comes up and says, "You have to watch your child more," it's then you say, "It's not our fault. We taught them right from wrong. They should have known better. We're doing the best we can." But this is where we do not take responsibility as parents. The role we play as parents does not stop and start when it suits us.
Mm-hmm.
It's an ongoing, continuous thing, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And it gets easier if we start it in the beginning. And I think sometimes we don't realize that. We don't start, we're molding these children.
To become the next adults that we're dealing with.
It's like when I went into the
Right in
service,
world.
and we have to be so careful about that. When I went into the service, we went to boot camp. Boot camp was the training ground to act like a person, like a military person.
Right.
And
Our
they
kids
stripped
are in boot camp, right?
They stripped you of all your old beliefs and behaviors. You did it that way and that way only.
Right.
Until you became accustomed to the rules and the regulations of a
Right.
military person.
Yep.
And if you didn't, you lost the right to be in the military.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people volunteered. I was a volunteer, so I wanted to be in. And I had to do what they said. Some of it I did not like because that wasn't what I was taught.
Mm-hmm.
There were things I had to do in boot camp that I did not want any part of, but I had to do it anyway.
But it shapes you up, gets you into shape, and gets you a better way of thinking.
It does, and it did, and that's the old cliche we always say, go in the service, become a man or become a woman, and get some responsibility and all that stuff.
See, the world nowadays is telling us we can't do that at home.
Yeah.
Before they go. It should be the parents' job to prepare these kids for life, to train them up to be, the soldier, if you will, in life, and to be respectful and to, listen to that first voice and the voice of authority. Every one of us have authoritative figures in our life.
And I kept thinking sometimes if we could bring not the boot camp physical stuff into the home.
Of course not.
But the ideology, like, I never had to worry about cleaning my plate off the table when I was at home eating. I'd eat and leave the plate there. I didn't make a mess, but I left it there. Mom would clean the table. And that's what she did. And she did that all my life. But when I got into service, you pick your plate up, you clean everything off, you take it over, you put the silverware in the silverware to be washed, you put the plates and the cups and all the stuff to be washed, and you do that. Now, why can't you do that as a child? Why can't, when the children are done eating, they pick their plate up and go put it in the sink?
Mine do.
Well, yours do. You know what you're doing.
Right.
We've been through all this. We've talked about this enough times. And you knew all this stuff before. But so many parents don't.
Yeah, my 2-year-old clears his plate. He's got a mom shadowing him, but he does it.
And it's small things like that they learn to do automatically. There's no punishment in that. There's no physical abuse in that.
No.
It's teaching them responsibility. It's their job. And as they get a little older and they start to understand the reward system versus reward and punishment. And not that you're gonna reward them for everything they do, because then they're gonna expect that.
Oh, yeah.
But every now and then, a spontaneous, positive consequence doesn't hurt. An unannounced night at McDonald's or an unannounced night at a movie really goes well when it's preceded by, you guys were good this week, we're gonna take you out.
I did that with the kids just Friday when I picked them up from school. All of them had, really good reports and talked to all the teachers, and you guys have been doing so good, we're gonna do this,
Yeah.
Went and did something special for them.
And they like that.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll go home and tell their friends and go back and tell their friends, we got to go here and we got to go there because we were good. We did what we were supposed to do. And that is the small stuff. That's where it starts. That's where the beginning is. And if we can teach our children by example, which is the next big step, if the children are made to put their plate in the sink, then we should do that as well. If the children are made to take their shoes off when they come in the house so they don't track mud and dirt and stuff all over the carpet, then we should do that as well.
Mike, that's something that I feel that we, as parents, it's our responsibility to teach the children and raise them up that way, because what happens when you go to work, you get a job, and you're in a business environment, and you've got a person there that isn't cleaning up after themselves, that's leaving their dishes on the counter. And I've gone into places and I see these signs up that say, please clean up your mess, your mother doesn't live or work here.
Yeah.
You see those signs, but it's very intrusive to a business when those people get a job, when these kids grow up, become an adult, get a job, if they don't have that already nurtured into them to be natural,
Yep.
a natural response to be respectful of other people's space, to be respectful of where you set your shoes, and that you don't leave your dishes setting out for, somebody else to be concerned about the mice getting into your building, your office. Because, that's all part of that training and raising these kids to know how to become an adult that gets along in society, that
Yep.
is liked. If other people, if we don't like our own kids, how do we expect anybody else to?
Yeah.
And that's a sad thing when you think about, you are raising the person that you want people to love, respect, admire, trust. And if we can't do that with our children, then we need to step back and say, okay, what am I doing wrong? As a parent, what can I do better to direct them and teach them and counsel them?
And it's, like we said, that's a good beginning, and it's a good thing we have to start doing. But also, like I said before, the small stuff, the little things.
Mhm.
When I grew up with a mom. My mom was divorced, and she raised the 5 of us to start with. There was 4 girls and myself. Well, I was the oldest, and then there was 4 girls. One thing all of us had to do, if the door was closed, you had to knock. You just couldn't walk in.
Right.
In any room in the house.
Mhm.
If the door was closed, it was closed for a reason.
Mhm.
Now, I didn't realize that until I got older, but it was just taught to us by Mom, knock on the door, and when you get told to come in, you can come in, otherwise don't come in.
Right.
And that's with the girls and my room as well. The girls were taught that for my room, as well as I was taught that for their room. And if we as parents could just look at the small things, start looking at peacefulness, and train them, start teaching them young, very young. We've only got a few seconds left here, so is there anything you want to say just to close this thing out?
No, just, I really enjoy reading your book and the counseling and the therapy that you have available to us for helping us with the children, and keep it up.
And it's growing. We're getting more invitations to speak and to small groups and youth groups and that kind of stuff. And just remember, it's how we teach our children, and that's all that matters.